The state of Washington is probably the only state in the world that's named after a brewer. The city of Gdańsk, Danzig, had its own beer style. It was called Jopenbier. Sourness in beer has long been considered a flaw, at least if you were not in Belgium. Hello and welcome back to the final episode of Beer-tastic this series. This time I'll take you to cities like Düsseldorf, Seattle, London, Gdańsk and others. We will explore together some of those beer styles that have gained fame in the new craft beer movement. We will find out that some of them are not as new as they seem to be. Beer styles like Porter, India Pale Ale or Altbier are centuries old. Altbier even means beer of the old kind. But it was only with the taste revolution of recent years that these beers were rediscovered. Nowadays, many people are looking for ever stronger flavors, more sophisticated combinations of aromas, only to find out that these were already available in food and drinks of former centuries. It takes talented brewers, however, to recreate these old types of beer. It takes passion, the right ingredients, and the right technology to bring out the best that is at the core of these styles. Sometimes brewing recipes had to be reconstructed from tiny pieces of information. Sometimes even these little hints were misleading. That is why the movement is called craft brewing. Brewers are applying the knowledge of craftsmen of long gone times. They share the same spirit, the same enthusiasm for creating a top quality beer as did brewers in medieval times. Occasionally you have to apply some changes to the brewing tradition. Sometimes modern malting technology, newly bred hop varieties or carefully collected yeast strains give a little twist to a traditional style. And sometimes, when those things come together in harmony, a new style is born, and we consumers are in beer heaven. Post-war Germany was a country with quick changes. The country had to be rebuilt, and it was rebuilt in concrete. Society was changing, and so were consumer habits. Everyone seemed to drink these light-flavored Pilsner beers. But then again, people wanted to see what the old culture was. What was the old culture of eating and drinking? So they sort of returned to some of the habits their grandparents had. They looked for the old food, and they looked for the old brewing recipes. The German province of North Rhine-Westphalia has two large rivaling cities. Cologne, the larger one, has its beer style called Kölsch. Düsseldorf, on the other hand, is the more influential town because Düsseldorf is also the capital city of the province. And the people here are proud of their local beer. Legend has it that no one from Düsseldorf would drink Kölsch, and no one in Cologne would drink Altbier. Well, thank God, we can do both. Dark, top-fermenting beers, in fact ales, had been the popular drink in the Düsseldorf region for many centuries. After World War II, people rediscovered the old style, and they asked the brewers, can I have an Altbier, a beer of the old style? Alt means old in German. So the name Altbier and the style Altbier as such was only established in the 1950s, and it's still very popular because it's an easy drinking beer, very bitter, probably the most bitter beer in the old traditional German styles, and it's very popular here in Düsseldorf. Modern craft brewers tend to be very open-minded. They're looking for brewing recipes in all corners of the world and take them home to their workplaces. It's also a very open community. Unlike in the old days when guilds were careful to keep their secrets, craft brewers share their knowledge freely with their customers and even with their competitors. Some discuss their brewing methods on the web in every detail, and some formulas are open source so that everyone can try to clone a particular beer at home. The American West Coast proves to be an ideal ground for growing this kind of beer culture. Seattle looks very much like a modern city, but when visiting it, you are standing on historic soil. Native Americans settled here about 4,000 years ago, so we can safely assume that they already had their individual beer recipes. The state of Washington is probably the only state in the world that's named after a brewer. That's right, George Washington, he was not only the first president of the United States, he also was a brewer. Here in Seattle, brewing started very early. Once settlers poured in, they brought hops, they cultivated hops, and they brewed beer. After Prohibition, hop production more or less moved to the other side of the Cascade Range. There, in the Yakima Valley, we find the largest hop growing area in the world. In the 1980s and 1990s, a new hop variety, Cascade, became available. And the craft brewing scene sort of picked up this special hop to make signature beers. In most IPAs in the 1990s, you would only find Cascade hops. And here in Seattle, there were lots and lots of new computer firms. And those computer people, they loved beer. So this is why the craft beer scene took hold here very early. And while it was IPA at first, now there's almost any beer style you can imagine brewed by brewers here in Washington. Pike Place Market is the oldest continuously operating farmers market in the country. It is famous for its selection of fresh fruit and vegetables, for fish, and of course for beer. One of my friends, the legendary Charles Finkel, runs a pub and brewery here. He and his brewmasters developed quite a range of different styles. So if you ever have the chance to visit a pub like this one, try to sample at least 2 or 3 different beers. Whenever I visit, I try to take notes. What does the beer look like? What aromas can you smell? What sensations does the beer bring to your palate? You undeniably enjoy the beer better when you keep records of all these impressions. So don't be shy. Grab a pen and some paper. I guarantee you it helps you discuss the beers later on. One of the beer styles that made the American beer revolution such a huge success was porter. After the end of Prohibition in 1933 and up to the mid-1980s, it was hard to find that style in America, unless you imported it from England. What makes that so remarkable is the fact that the founding fathers of this great nation had been porter drinkers. America's first president, George Washington, was not only a home brewer, but he also wore false teeth. John Greenwood, his personal dentist in New York, crafted these, and Greenwood recommended cleaning the president's false teeth with porter beer. Here's the letter he wrote to him. New York, December 28, 1789. Sir, I sent you enclosed 2 sets of teeth that you sent me from Philadelphia, which when I received them were very black, either by your soaking them in port wine or by you drinking it. Port wine, being sour, takes off all the polish, and all acids tend to soften every kind of teeth and bone. If you want your teeth yellower, soak them in broth or port liquor, but not in tea or acid. Porter beer is a good thing to color them, and will not hurt, but preserve them. I guess you won't get that recommendation from your dentist nowadays. One of London's most popular tourist attractions is Buckingham Palace, first used by Queen Victoria in the 19th century. Queen Victoria's favorite tipple was French claret, mixed with malt whiskey, but she also indulged in beer from time to time, and she knew how important beer was to the ordinary people. She once said, "Give my people plenty of beer, good beer and cheap beer, and you will have no revolution among them." I came to London to sample some of that beer, the London Porter, a style introduced to the Londoners about 100 years before Queen Victoria was born. In those days, it was by far more popular than it is today. In fact, I had to call a colleague from the British Guild of Beer Writers to ask for a place that serves porter on draft. He told me about a tiny pub, accessible only through 2 narrow and easy-to-miss alleyways. And hidden it is. The barman there claimed full of pride that they once had a customer that had worked around the corner for 6 years and never found a place. Porter beer is one of the most diverse beer styles, at least when it comes to dark ales. The beer style was invented in 1722 by the brewer of the Bell Tavern in Shoreditch, East London. His name was Ralph Harwood. At least this is what you can read in the history books. Records don't show that this man ever lived or the brewery ever existed, but there were about 200 breweries in London around 1700. And it's true that in the 1720s, porter beer became very popular. At that time, this tavern here had been around for more than 150 years. Let's have a look inside. The pub itself is unashamedly traditional. No TVs, just relics and collectibles from earlier times. It is also rumored that Queen Elizabeth I danced around a cherry tree that is still inside the front wall. But most important is the fact that the porter here is served on hand pump and that it can be enjoyed in a genuine historical atmosphere. By the way, did you know that there was a time when beer was much less popular than gin? By the middle of the 18th century, there was about 6 times as much gin sold in London than beer. There was one man who wanted to change that, and it was William Hogarth, a famous painter. He painted and made prints of 2 pictures. One showed Beer Street, the other showed Gin Lane. Well, Gin Lane was set in the east of London, very poor parish. People were poor there, people were drinking lots of gin, and the only business that you could see that was thriving and that scene, that was the pawnbroker. On the other hand, there was Beer Street, pictured in West London, with beer drinkers, all happy people, all businesses doing well, except the one of the pawnbroker. Well, on that time, in the middle of the 18th century onwards, gin consumption was decreasing, and that was the rise of industrial brewed beer. Given the fact that London was once one of the world's most prestigious brewing towns, it is surprising to see just how few traces of this history you can locate in modern London. There are very few landmarks that point to London's rich brewing heritage. Maybe because large breweries generate a lot of traffic in a city center that could be hard to handle. Or maybe because breweries can be dangerous too. For example, on October 17, 1814, a massive vat burst at the Meaux Brewery on Tottenham Court Road. It caused what was later called the London Beer Flood. 8 people drowned in porter beer. There are several explanations why porter beer is called porter beer. One is that the beer originally was a blend of several different ales, like stale ale and fresh dark ale. And to mark the casks that contained the blended ale, you put a P on them for ad porta in Latin, out of the door. Not sure whether this is true. Another explanation, which is quite probable, is that that was the favorite triple of the beer drinkers that were working as porters on the London markets. There's one story and one fun fact that you might want to know. In 1914, when the First World War broke out, the British government had these licensing laws that should reduce the amount of drink consumed. They said that a bar, a pub, could only be open for lunch and dinner, but not so on the London markets. Here were pubs that were open early in the morning so the porters could get a drink, a porter for the market porters. Porter was the first beer produced on a large scale, and it enjoyed huge popularity in the 18th and 19th centuries. It was so popular that many American bars and restaurants called themselves porterhouse, a name still reflected in the term porterhouse steak. And it did not stop there. Today, the style guidelines for the World Beer Cup know of 16 different categories of porters and stout porters. There are coconut porters from Austria, vanilla porters from Spain, and chocolate porters from Italy. Also smoked porters from Alaska and Baltic porters from, well, everywhere around the Baltic Sea. While some variants of porter are light in body and refreshing, the Baltic porters are up to 10% strong, the right beers for the sometimes harsh climate of the region. Gdańsk is best known for beautiful and unique ambers, since it's the world's biggest amber exporter. But I'm more of an amber guy when it comes to the color of beer. By the way, Gdańsk still has its historical beer bell that was used to announce the opening of pubs in the old times. The city of Gdańsk, Danzig, had its own beer style. It was called Jopenbier. It was a dark beer very rich in extract. That beer was exported to other towns of the Hanseatic League, and it was also exported to London. Many people claim that this Jopenbier had somewhat of an influence on the development of the London Porter style. But when London Porter was exported from England to the Baltic countries, well, at that time, people here decided that they preferred that London Porter, or the stout version of the Russian Imperial Stout. That beer influenced the beer styles all around the Baltic Sea. The style that came out of this was called Baltic Porter, and that one still exists today, unlike the Jopenbier. Jopenbier has disappeared. There's a legend that says that once in a century, all stone creatures adorning tops of the townhouses in Gdańsk come to life for one night. Well, I haven't been visited by any creature, and if so, I would not have shared the rare Baltic Porter I got from a local beer store. Baltic Porters are exceptional beers. They're not only strong, they also deserve to be served at a temperature between 10 to 12 degrees centigrade. And if you have a few bottles of them at home, you might like to try to age them in your cellar, because they really get better with the years. And they have a fantastic aroma, which resembles of chocolate. So here's one tip: try it with a chocolate cake. One of the characteristics of early porter beers was their slightly tart or acidic taste. Porter tun rooms had their very own microflora. It was the French chemist Louis Pasteur who studied the microorganisms that sometimes ruined whole batches of porter beers and taught London brewers how to prevent their beers from turning too sour. For the following 100 years or so, most brewers tried to avoid anything that would make a beer taste sour. And of course, you would not like to drink sour IPAs, pilsners, lagers, or wheat beers. But the little acidity is welcome in some beers, and in some very rare cases, it is even style-defining. Like I mentioned before, America's Pacific Northwest is home to some of the world's most adventurous brewers. In the very first phase of the new craft beer movement, they focused on hoppy beers, sometimes on extremely hoppy beers. That only seemed natural, as the Pacific Northwest has the world's largest hop acreage. But in recent years, many brewers in the region found a different approach to brewing. they studied which microorganisms might add a pleasant sourness to beers. On my journey, I contacted some of my fellow beer judges and asked them about places to go and find good sour beers. And most of them named one city nowadays associated with that style: Portland, Oregon. They say that in Portland, sour is the new bitter. Sourness in beer has long been considered a flaw, at least if you were not in Belgium. Belgium always had some sour beers. But in recent years, maybe 8 or 10 years ago, some American brewers discovered that a tartness, a little sourness, would give the beer a certain new aroma, maybe also a new taste, and there's lots of different sour beers now in a city like Portland, Oregon, that focuses on sour beers. I hear that someone even moved to Portland because he has the best choice of sour beers here in all America. These sour beers have wonderful sourish aromas like lactic, some also with a fruity touch. So sourness and some sweet fruitiness go very well together. In fact, I believe that many brewers will make beers of different styles in a conventional way and then inoculate them with some lactic bacteria and see how it turns out as a sour beer. So there's much more in beer than we can even imagine nowadays. The base for souring beer is always the malt. Remember, enzymes in the malt convert starch to sugars, and yeast converts sugar to alcohol. Different strains of yeast will deliver different results, and so will different other microbes that can digest sugars and add sourness and aroma to the finished product. But with different malts, there's a chance that there's even more complexity. Not only in the aroma, but also in the taste and even the color of the beers that can range from straw to red or black. When I checked my map for places that looked promising to offer good beer, I stumbled upon a forest that is called Stout Grove. Would I find an unusual stout there? A stout brewed right in that state park? To cut a long story short, there is no brewery in Stout Grove. There is a lot of water, a lot of rain. It is in fact the wet climate, the fertile soil, and moderate temperature of the region that provides optimal growing conditions for redwood trees. These giants stand up to 300 feet, about 100 meters high, and some of them are more than 1,500 years old. I wonder if Native Americans brewed beer in the shadows of these trees at that early point in their history. It was a truly impressive hike in the redwood forests, apart from the somewhat disappointing fact that this forest has absolutely nothing to do with stout beer. It got its name from Frank D. Stout, a famous lumberjack and railroad entrepreneur. But the redwoods made me think of red ale. And luckily enough, I found a brewery nearby Crescent City that brews an excellent interpretation of red ale using a reddish kind of malt. During the 19th century, malts became paler and paler, and so were the beers, like Pilsner beers. The Vienna style almost died out, and so did many beer styles that sort of focused on reddish beers. But in recent years, brewers have rediscovered the virtues of darker malts, of the roasty note that the darker malt can give to the beer, and they have even evaluated the malt character and seen how it works in different styles, like in hobby beers. India Pale Ale is a beer style that's focusing on the hops. But here we have a red India Ale, and this is a beer that sort of merges the virtues of maybe an Irish red with the virtues of a true American IPA. And there's lots and lots of malt character in the malt and in the beer. On each of my travels, I discover new beers and meet brewers that have an innovative approach to brewing. Some of them have succeeded in adding something utterly unique to the old and well-established craft of beer making. Having been surprised so often with unique and delicious new brews, I still wonder from time to time what the future of beer will be. And I have asked some of my friends and colleagues from the brewing scene that same question.
Well, I hope. We already are seeing the change towards cans, so just the packaging of beer has changed a lot. But in terms of styles, I don't know if this is just a United States thing, but beers get a little crazy here of what we add to it. It's a lot. I've seen like Mexican biscotti stouts and, oh my gosh, raspberry lime gozas or all these things. And I think the trend is going to go back more towards traditional styles. We're never going to leave our IPAs, that's for sure. That's here to stay. They might get hoppier. We go through stages of more dry hops, more bitterness, and it's kind of just, it's ever changing. And I think it's cyclical. I think we'll come back to where it used to be of just traditional styles.
I think every spirit barrel that you just spoke about will probably have been used. I mean, if we haven't done it, I know there's probably a brewery that has acquired a certain barrel from, you know, a trip to a different country and seeing the spirits that are produced in other countries. So I think the creative book is just going to keep opening, and it's pretty limitless, I'd say. Also, the blending potentials of not just single releases of spirits, but how they blend with other spirits.
Yeah, with the number of brewers that we have right now, and just everybody's pushing everybody else to just continue to try new things, I think that we'll, yeah, like you said, in a couple of years we'll have exhausted everything that is probably out there, and probably a handful of other things that probably not even thinking about.
Well, when I started, the American brewing industry was about at its low point in 1980. There were roughly about 45 licensed breweries in America, brewing companies in America. There were a few more breweries than that. Today we've got more than 6,000, I think, and growing still. So I think the whole craft of brewing in America, the individualistic brewers that have come after we started, have made a really dynamic industry in the U.S. And I think the consumer is really wanting to learn more about beer, to explore the wide range of beer styles that the new generation of brewers are brewing. So I think beer is definitely here to stay. There's certainly always going to be big beer, but I think that the pioneering small breweries will continue to thrive in America.
Oh gosh, if I knew that, I'd probably be a millionaire, but what I hope will happen in the next 10 or 15 years is we will see more and more people going from those industrial beers to like the Kölsch and things like that, and growing their palate as they get excited exploring and trying new beers, which means that would just support the craft beer movement more and more by having these people join us in the craft beer revolution.
Well, we're already seeing it. We're seeing people really concentrating on the art of brewing good beer, trying to explore every conceivable aspect of beer. What are the raw materials? How can we juxtapose those raw materials to make a really great taste? And so there's hardly any ingredient that I haven't tasted a beer brewed with, whether that's chanterelles or cannabis or every kind of fruit or vegetable or nut or whatever. And so I think more of the same. People like that. Sour beers, they seem to be a really popular style of beer right now. We have only one brew house, so we're reticent to do Brettanomyces in the same space as we do our other beers because we don't want to contaminate the system. But we do barrel-aged beers, and as soon as we brew a barrel-aged beer, it sells out. It sells immediately. So we know there's a pent-up demand for beers that when you think about when I started in beer, all beers were line priced. You know what I mean by line price? So if a Miller, a Coors, a Bud, a Schlitz, they were all $2.99 for a six-pack. Then I had the distinction of introducing the most expensive beer that had ever been marketed in America, Samuel Smith Oatmeal Stout, $7.99 a six-pack, which no one had ever heard of, compared to one that was $3.99 that was highly advertised on television. But people like me, and I was the target market, they didn't mind spending $7.99 to get something of quality. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see less line price, even with IPA. As creative as we like to think of ourselves as American craft brewers, a lot of them taste very much the same. I write for a magazine, I get IPAs every month. My analysis is if you can taste the hops the following day, they use too damn many hops.
A problem. A problem. A lot of Belgian styles, like double and triple, are very strong in alcohol. And there is a reason for that. After the First World War, we had a law in Belgium. It was forbidden to serve in pubs high alcoholic beverages like Genever. It was forbidden. So the brewers replaced the alcohol of the Genever by strong beers. So this is the country of strong beers, the triples, the doubles, even the quadruples, Duvel, all those types of beer. But now the problem is you cannot drive a car when you drink two of that strong alcoholic beers. So that's a problem. And I think future will be beers with as much as possible taste, but lower in alcohol. And let's start with Saison types. Saison type beers are only 6%. For British, 6% is very, very strong beer because the British ales are maybe 3.5%, 4%. But for us in Belgium, it's low 6. And then we'll see. But I think future will be a lot of taste and less alcohol.
All lagers, all beer styles are based on yeast. You start with ales, you start with lager, you start with spontaneous fermentation. And now you start with this Iberianer yeast, with the wild lager yeast. It's a whole new beer style, even a whole new family of beer styles. And this is the first one, the original, where you only change the yeast. But I can imagine in the future, people start playing with hops and with malt, that we get different beer styles in that family. So in 10 years, I hope that there are maybe 3 or 4 even beer styles out of this original one.
Well, I think this craft beer movement is very healthy for beer. I just made a trip in America, and I give you one example. I was on a industrial spot in Fort Collins, Colorado, where the new Belgian beer brewery is. But it was surrounded by other breweries. There were 24 breweries for a village or a city of 140,000 people. So it was a Saturday afternoon, and I took a bike, of course, from the New Belgium. They all have their bikes. So I was biking around, and I see every of those 24 breweries, there was a party going on. You go in, you see all young people drinking beer, tasting beer. And you don't see any one of them drinking Coca-Cola or Pilsner beer. And I think this is the future of beer.
I think it still will be lager beers, because I found out right now, I mean, it's a huge hype for everything right now with IPAs and all the special beers, what the Americans do, or like also what the Europeans do right now. But the Europeans, what they do is like the same thing. They just copy the brands from overseas. And we have so many awesome beers already in Europe, you know, and I think we will still have a couple of these crazy experience flavors, or still like maybe changed a little bit, but I think the ground flavor will be still kind of regular lager beer here in Franconia, because it's even like for us, it's a very hard market to sell your beer in Munich or in Bavaria as a Franconian brewer.
Well, I think at the moment the so-called craft beer revolution is very much alive and transforming what we think about beer. And I think this will be going on for another 10 years or so, at least, meaning that we look into more specialty beers, more different flavors, more invention in that respect. At the same time, traditional beers such as Schlenkerla, but maybe also some of the Trappist brews, or traditional beers like Sahti in Finland, they will also profit from that, because people are aware of the diversity. What is going to come after that? That's really going to be the tricky question. Is this a permanent development where people are interested in diversity and quality, or will it return back to the not so nice ways of the 70s and 80s, especially in the United States, where there were mass producers that basically controlled the market? So I think this is going to be a really interesting question. And if you look in the United States, that a lot of industry breweries now purchase craft beer brands, it's not certain that craft beer as such will survive the next 20 years.
In 10 years, I would say you will be able to see a lot more different varieties in China. Not only in big cities, even in the secondary and the third tier cities. You will have a lot more choices, and the beer will be, the local brewers, they are creative. They will use the local ingredients, and even there might be local Chinese style beers coming up very soon.
Yeah, I expect brewers in South Africa to start experimenting with a lot of different grains, of which I'm already on it. Different grains, including fruits. People use fruits in beer. I mean, not so many people I've heard of have been using like the local indigenous fruits in the beer. So personally, that's what I'll be doing this year. And I know a friend of mine who's a brewer has already been trying to experiment with things like Amarula and probably even the yeast. We haven't had like the local like yeast captured here. So that's one thing that I'm expecting to see from some local scientists, the guys who are gonna capture the local wild yeast and stuff like that. Because like here we're using a Belgian yeast. I would love to be able to capture a local yeast, a very good one somewhere, somehow, and yeah, something like that. That would define a proper African beer that would be 100% like African and stuff like that, yeah.
Hopefully, I want to see what I am seeing in London, so lots of areas with very small pockets of new breweries that are quite small, so 4, 5, 6 barrel breweries. I want to see that everywhere. I want people to be able to in their local town in the middle of Scotland to be able to walk down the road and go and have a pint at their local brewery and to know their local brewer and to know what goes in their product.
Well, we'll see in 10 years from now which one had the right gut feeling about the future trends in brewing and selling beer, right? I have seen so many beer trends come and go, from brewers who started their career literally brewing beer in their grandmother's bathtub, to managers who never even brewed a single batch of homebrew, but were great inventors of strong brands. Some started their business as a multi-tap bar, others set up a small brewery in a pub and ended up with a successful brewpub. I met people who studied brewing at the famous University of Brewing in Weinstefan, only to find out that it would be much too costly to build their own state-of-the-art brewery. So they created a brand of gypsy brewers, took their recipes from one brewery to the next, brewed an ale here and a stout there, and won some respect for that. Not all of them. In fact, very few indeed got rich in the brewing industry. But they all seem to have a happy life brewing beers that paved the way for new, exciting taste sensations. Being back in Shanghai, I grabbed the chance to meet up with two young brewers that have a clear vision what the future of beer is like in a vast country like China. They gave me a short tour of the brewery, where I stumbled across numerous bags of malt coming from many familiar parts we've visited before. And best of all, they proudly wanted me to sample some of their latest batches, not only out of courtesy, but to pick up some bits of advice that I had for them as well. It's an open-minded and open-hearted community, as I said before. That's why I adore this world of brewing so much. IPA has traveled a long way. It was first brewed in Britain to be drunk in India. Then brewers brought it to Africa. And in recent years, brewers in the US have discovered that this beer is really different. This is the one beer style that became the signature beer for craft beer brewing. And US brewers told brewers all over the world to brew their personal variants of IPAs. There's even a Jasmine IPA that I discovered in Vietnam. And now here in Shanghai, we're sitting at a beer bar that has several IPAs that are brewed in-house, all of them tasting fantastic. There is this hoppy aroma to it. There is this bittersweet taste to it. There is so much to discover about beer. I hope you find a bar that has a nice variety of beers, and I toast to you because I know now you're looking for good beers. Cheers. What a fabulous drink. Popular Science, a monthly magazine now more than 145 years old, reported in 1936 that the University of Birmingham in the UK had built a midget brewery the size of a small car, capable of brewing a gallon or almost 4 liters per batch. It definitely prefigured the invention of the commercial microbrewery in the 1970s. In 1952, Belgian scientist Robert Mouton patented a method for turning beer into a pill using vacuum drying. But turning that pill back into beer was not that simple. You had to add water, alcohol and carbon dioxide to it to get a drink which has, as he called it, the delicate flavor and body of the original beer. In the 21st century, with modern technology and the wide availability of computing power, the future has finally arrived. In many countries, self-service bars emerged where customers use their credit cards to pay for beer dispensed from taps built right into the table and displays which tell them how much they've poured. The almost instant personal homebrewer is almost a reality too, thanks to numerous crowdfunding projects currently available on the web. For decades, people were convinced that the robot bartender was just around the corner, or that we get our favorite drinks out of multiple vending machines. The problem was, and sometimes is, that mechanical technology can be unreliable, and humans could always do it better, cheaper, and most of the time with more stimulating conversation. So let's see what the future really brings. As long as it's great diversity of styles with good natural brews that I can enjoy with family, friends and colleagues, it's fine with me. I hope that you enjoyed making this delicious journey to the world of beer styles with me. I definitely did. Maybe our path will cross somewhere and we can sample a good brew together? It would surely be an honor for me. So again, until then, cheers, prost, salut, na zdrowie, whatever you call it in your country.